One of the main astrological boogeymen of today's world has got to be the Saturn return. Most people know at this point that Mercury retrograde bad, Saturn return bad. But you may be wondering, what is the function of Saturn in the broader context of an astrological chart? So if you were wondering that, I've made this video to answer that very question. So let's begin with that short answer that I promised you in the title. Your Saturn placement can show areas and ways in which you face limitation or restriction. It can show ways in which you are mature, and it can show details about your sense of responsibility. That's it. That's the short answer. But there's obviously loads more to it, so stick around, we're getting to the long answer. So let's begin this long answer by considering the physical astronomical planet of Saturn. So very interestingly, Saturn is the furthest away planet from the Earth and from the Sun that you can see with the naked eye. So before the discovery of Uranus in the 1700s, which of course wasn't possible without the use of technology, i.e. telescopes, Saturn was considered to be the edge of the solar system. And this, very interestingly, is also reflected in the rings around Saturn. Like it's almost like a shield in it. It's got a lot to do with this planet to do with physical limits, right? Because beyond the Saturn, the orbit of Saturn was considered to be heaven, the firmament, the stars, and so on. So that really was the boundary of physical reality of ancient astrology. And we can take this archetypically to represent essentially difficulties, right? Limits and difficulties, in that Saturn transits, aspects, and also the natal house of Saturn in your chart can show where things can be a little bit difficult, where you can experience some of these physical limits. So if we look a little bit into the mythology, Uranus, as I've just mentioned, in myth was Uranos. They tweaked it just a little bit. So the planet of Uranus represents new and innovative ideas and theories, and Uranos was a very potent creator titan and so on. So Kronos, it was the Greek name for Saturn, basically overthrew Uranus by castrating him. He basically lopped his balls off, which I think is a really good analogy for the sense of physical reality, removing the perfection from the potential. It's almost like imperfection is the price that is paid in exchange for manifestation of an idea or of a concept, when it can be perfect in your mind, but as soon as it's brought into physical manifestation, it necessarily becomes imperfect in some way or another. That's like the toll that Saturn demands of the physical realm, and that's again related to the physical limits of reality. So in astrology then, Saturn represents the part of us that gets real, right? Saturn represents the physical body, really. It's like the harsh truths, like the well-lit mirror that shows you all the imperfections in your face that you normally don't want to see, or that you try and hide from yourself and from other people. And by using filters or whatever, you know, on the phone or whatever it is, Saturn, it doesn't show you any of that because it wants you to get real. Of course, these characteristics of Saturn are really necessary, and they're ultimately useful as well. We can have all the ideas in the world, all the ideas you want, and Saturn is the part of us that makes it into something that urges you to make it happen. It's the show me the money kind of thing. And I mentioned the Saturn return earlier. In my experience, the Saturn return tends to be more difficult for people who basically haven't been putting in the work, because that's a big part of Saturn's role. It's about dragging you through the work, whether you really want to or not. So I feel like for a lot of people, the Saturn return ends up being a bad time if they haven't been, as I say, putting in the work. So it's like Saturn comes back round and transit to his natal position, and it's like, oh, you haven't been doing any of the work. Okay, well, we'll go to do it right now. And then it becomes a more uncomfortable ride. I'm a Capricorn dominant, and Saturn, I think, is one of my most dominant planets in my chart. So you know, I'm all about this stuff, but hear from someone else, they won't like it so much. But I really feel that these aspects of Saturn, they are really useful, and they're ultimately for your best good as well. Another related thing that the Saturn return will teach you is it teaches you the growing up, basically the lessons from growing up that basically you haven't done yet, right? The harsh realities of life that we sometimes don't want to look at, just like this mirror that I imagined earlier before. So Saturn teaches us to mature by working through boundaries in order to develop discipline. And that's one of the very key roles of Saturn in astrology. Your Saturn placement then can give hints as to ways in which you are called to do some of this work yourself in your current Saturn cycle. As I mentioned before in this myth, Kronos, who is the Greek name for Saturn, he overthrew his tyrant father with the help actually of his mother, who was Gaia. So they've got, of course, the Earth goddess is helping her son overthrow the ideological idealist of Uranus. This is all well and good, except that Saturn, actually, when he was the ruler, he became a tyrant himself, and he was delivered a prophecy that he himself would be overthrown by one of his children, and he didn't want this at all. So what he started doing was he started eating his own children. And one of these children, whose name is Zeus, you may have heard of him, he did eventually fulfill the prophecy and overthrow his own father, Kronos. And this shows how resistant this archetype is to change, no matter how natural that change is in the grand order of things. So in a chart, this can often come through via your relationship to parents or other authority figures who basically want to suppress any kind of change, no matter how inevitable or how positive even that change may be. And while this definitely can be an external urge, as I've just mentioned with parents or other authority figures, this self-limitation can also be an internal urge. Of course, that's why it's called self-limitation. Said that a bit too early. So essentially, your natal Saturn placement, and more specifically by the house rather than the sign, can show areas in which you feel these kinds of limitations in your life. So by the time we get to Saturn, we're pretty far out from the Sun in the solar system. As I mentioned, it's the furthest away object that you can see with the naked eye. So in astrology, we consider the influence of Saturn to be felt most strongly through aspect between Saturn and other natal planets, or of course through transit as well. So the planets that are aspected by Saturn, if it's a challenging aspect, an opposition or a square or even a conjunction as well, maybe that planet will find its expression more difficult. Maybe that you'll find that that'll be a difficult part of you to work with and to express. Or perhaps if it's a harmonious aspect, if it's a sextile or a trine or something like that, you may find that discipline is more of a useful, practical thing in the expression of that energy in your personality and in your life. So if that's you, if you've got strong Saturn placements in your chart, I'd love to know how this has come up for you. If it's more of a useful, discipline, kind of realistic approach that has been imbued with those placements, or if it's more of a restrictive thing that stops you from really expressing that part of yourself. I'd love for you to let me know in the comments below. Alright, that's it. Those are my thoughts on Saturn in the context of an astrology chart. So thank you for watching. If you want to see more of these kinds of astrology videos, you can let me know by hitting the like button below, hitting the subscribe button that's also below. And if you want to go even further, you can leave me a little comment saying whatever you like, because it all counts. It helps to feed the algorithm and helps grow the channel. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you next time.